Big T, set this up. Tyre Nichols, what's happening, and how does that play into the rebuilding trust between blacks and law enforcement?
Well,
would you say rebuilding?
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
Exactly.
I'm taking my seat.
Tyre Nichols was a 29-year-old black African-American man in Memphis, Tennessee. He was on his way home, a couple blocks from his house, matter of fact, when he was pulled over by an undercover advanced team called the Scorpion Team. They
all black.
Because they're undercover. Now you have to. The setup is this: you have to understand Memphis. Memphis has a lot of issues with crime, a lot of issues with carjackings. So someone blowing at you, telling you to pull over, you're not necessarily going to do it right away because of the rampant violence that's going on over there.
Yeah.
That was the instance with him. So I guess when they first rolled up on him, they, because they said he committed a traffic violation.
No sirens? What do you mean rolled up on him?
They pulled him over.
Okay.
In the end, they had the sirens on. They did not have the sirens on, from my understanding, in the beginning. Because they're undercover team. They're Scorpion Team. This was a lawless group of officers who were empowered by their chief.
All black.
They were a specific team. And it was an all-black team. Well, no, it was not all-black team. It was majority black team. And on that particular night when they pulled Tyre over, body cam shows him getting pulled out of his car, and he's asking, what's going on? What did I do? What's going on? He don't even know. They don't even address them. They don't say license, registration, none of it. They snatch open the man's door and start pulling him out. And so, of course, he's resistant, but he ain't swinging. They put him on the ground. He is like, just, what's going on? You guys, this is too much. This is too much. He's not a big man. It's interesting how they're always picking these guys who are not big men. He's not a big man. And so they got him on the ground, and he's talking to them, and they're just roughing him up. And then they start tasing him. And dude was like, oh, heck no.
He got up and ran.
And he got up and bolted. And when he ran, he got about a block and a half, about a half a block from his house.
Right.
Oh, no.
About a half block from his house.
Right.
Oh, no.
And what happened was they couldn't find him at first, and one of the other guys pulled up, and they see him, and they like, oh, is that him? Yeah, he's got the description on, because they weren't the ones who originally accosted him. So basically, he take off running again, and he gets trapped. They catch him.
They pin him up.
By the time when they get to him,
It's terrible.
they beat this man to death.
Yeah.
They beat him to death.
Wow.
On camera. Not only the body cam footage, there was a halo kind of camera that caught everything.
And you watched this?
Yes.
Wow.
And they beat that man.
Yep.
They kicked him in his head several times. They stood him up and worked him over. They beat him with batons. They sprayed him with, you name it, they did it to him. To the extent, by the time the paramedics finally came, the man was slumped down on the ground, laying against the police car, slumped. They didn't know what to do. The paramedics were like, what happened to him, And make a long story short, he died from his injuries about 2 days later. And he never recovered from the coma he went into. And so 5 black officers, I told you that there was, one of the officers was white. He was not charged. He was fired, but he was not charged. So 5 black officers were charged in his murder. They had a combined, I think, 21 counts against them. And I think maybe like 5 each or something like that. Wow. Something like 5 or 6 each, whatever it was, from all the way from first-degree murder or second-degree murder, not first-degree, second-degree murder, all the way down to. They actually was smart. This prosecution was smart. They even put in the issues with the violating the rules, violating their protocols. So they had charges attached to those. So they didn't just throw out the murder charge like a lot of people would do. And they said, well, we couldn't do nothing. It was just we didn't believe it was murder. They found those. Well, let me correct myself. Two of the officers turned state's evidence against the other three.
Right.
Oh, wow.
They turned state's evidence against the other three. So when the trial comes up, they testify to what the other three did, as well as what their role was.
Right.
But they also testify to what the other three had done. This trial was one of the fastest trials for this kind of murder case.
Yep.
I first of all, I'm not a lawyer, but you know, I slept at motels. Was that Motel 6?
The Holiday Inn Express.
I slept at Holiday Inn Express. This trial was about a week long.
Yeah.
And then they had the verdict the very next week.
Yep.
Wow.
That's how long this trial was. And so I think the prosecutors put on, maybe about 8 witnesses, 7 to 8 witnesses.
Oh my goodness.
And the defense attorneys put on, they put on more. I think they put on 17. But they were all quick. They had moved the trial. This is important. The judge allowed them to move the trial from Shelby County out to, I think it's Chattanooga, which is, I think, East Tennessee. Now, the difference is the demographics. The folks in Memphis know all about the Scorpion team. They know they're abusive. They know they've killed other folks. They know they've planted drugs. They know they've done all this evil stuff. These white folks out in Chattanooga, they just know they're police officers.
Yeah.
And this brother was resisting arrest, got up and ran, and he must have caused his own death and deserved to die. Because in, I think, was it 2 hours?
They
I
didn't
think the
deliberate very
verdict
long.
was in within 2
Yeah,
hours.
they didn't deliberate long
They
at all.
came out with not guilty on all the charges for all those officers.
Yep.
No matter what, you were watching this on, it was the Rodney King all over again. Same dynamic. Moved the trial. It was in Simi Valley, right? They moved this out to Chattanooga. All white jury. I think it was 8 women, 4 men, all white. And
Cops lost their
they
job. Did cops lose their job?
Yeah, they all got fired because they thought they was all going to go to prison.
Yeah.
But they're going to be able to go work somewhere else now.
Yeah, get their back.
And
Absolutely. They were
unless-
found not guilty.
And now here's
They'll be in Aurora.
now here's where elections have
A-town.
Here's where elections have consequences. Before you could depend on the federal government, the DOJ probably saying, "All right, we're going to take this case over."
Oh.
And we're gonna,
Can't now.
See that?
Yeah, that's
You
what
see what I'm saying?
Wow.
Before you could depend on that.
Yeah.
That's what happened. That's what happened with Rodney King.
Right.
Right? They let them dudes off, but DOJ said, "Nah, not so fast. Nah, not so fast."
Wow.
Now you have a DOJ who's sympathetic to the police, who even already removed these kinds of things from their protocols.
Yeah.
So, horrible situation. The only thing that saved Memphis, in my opinion, was I said it online when I wrote a post. I said the angels are crying over the crime that happens in of that abuse, because it was a torrential downpour yesterday after the verdict. The torrential downpour. We don't like to riot in the rain. It's hard to burn stuff up. Yeah. But so I think that might have been.
But you're a conspiracy theorist also. Did they seed the clouds?
Yes.
Oh wow.
Absolutely.
Oh wow.
Absolutely.
What is happening?
Absolutely. Since you brought it up.
But with old boy,
Yes,
with old boy in office
What
running
in
the
the-
Justice Department, that's not going. Justice Department would have never taken that
They're not
case.
gonna
But let me just ask this before we wrap up. In terms of this dynamic, what was the response of community? Like, there was a huge outpouring based on the verdict of Rodney King, the George Floyd verdict. Now you're talking about Tyre Nichols. What has been the response, or have we gotten to the point where there's nothing more to see in these particular cases and we have protested enough?
I don't know yet. I think this weekend is going to tell us that.
That could be.
I think this weekend is going to tell us that, Brother Jeff. I don't know that you can ever protest enough with those kinds of visuals.
What about the black leadership? I mean, I'm pretty sure there were press conferences and folks coming out. What did Reverend Al Sharpton do? And like, where
And the
where
NAACP.
the guys? Where the guys and the people at? Where did they show up?
Nan was not at the press conference I saw yesterday.
Okay.
Matter of fact, they had what I saw was most of the family attorneys and things like that speaking. I don't know. I'm not going to say. I can't say whether
Benjamin
or not they
Crump
did or
was
not.
Benjamin Crump there.
Benjamin Crump was there because you remember
Okay.
was Benjamin. I don't know if he was at that press conference I saw, but Benjamin Crump was part of that.
He's been on it.
trial. Yes, he's part of that trial, and he's part of the family's attorneys for the lawsuit. And of course, he made his official statement of how disgusting it was.
Wow. Well, the great Leanne Wheeler, final thoughts on this dynamic and the continuing dynamic around these narratives where they said they were rebuilding trust between law enforcement and black people. And I'm trying to figure out when that started.
Well, and that's probably why they're tearing all the history books off the shelves. But I mean, there was a slave patrol whose function it was to catch runaway slaves, and the evolution of that, I would argue, is modern day policing as a function, which is not, as it occurs for me, public safety. There has to be a public safety conversation. We have to rethink public safety, but this policing as a function, and we're gonna soon find it out when this dude declares martial law on everybody. We'll soon find out exactly what I'm talking about. But the idea is to control the movement of people, and so there was no trust in that,
Right.
to begin with.
But
In order to, so it's a fallacy to say that we now need to rebuild it. Going back to what we said at the start of the hour, policing as a function occurs for us in our bias. Like, I feel safe knowing. Right? And so, or I don't feel safe knowing. And that's it. It's Boolean. I either feel safe or I don't feel safe. But the intention of the slave patrols, and not much has changed since evolution, was to control black bodies.
But there's
and those folks were not held accountable for the brutality that they committed against those bodies.
But the great Leanne Wheeler, here's the piece I want to ask you three, because historically it's been, okay, this is horrible, implicit bias. We just need to get some more black officers on the force.
Well, we just had a bunch of them get off this. So that's the deal.
We started this conversation with, and these officers were all black.
The mechanism is the mechanism. That's the deal. You know, not much has changed since the plantation. And I don't mean that as hyperbole. It just hasn't. We were founded on folks who were enslaved and brought here and working against their will. And there was a mechanism. We can call it corporate now if we want. But there was a mechanism. Like, these people will till the earth for their lives, not a wage, not a living wage, not their freedom, not any. That's the deal, and we've been yoked to jobs ever since. And so when you don't, But what we've been messaging, what feels better, and the folks who fought for unions and fought for workers' rights and fought for child labor laws, all of that stuff. We're now in a place where the jig is up.
Wow.
Right? And so we absolutely should have a public safety function. It's not policing. That function has an entirely different purpose. That has not changed. And so there are some of us, when we talked about this earlier, there are some of us as black people that feel better about that, or being adjacent to that. They're acting up. I've got people in my family that are very conservative that way. When they got shot, they just done what they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
They believe that. And so, but the function has not, it hasn't evolved very much. We just said, well, we can't hold them like, on TV anymore. Or we can't do this, or we can't do that. It's real weird.
Not on TV no more.
Well, it's kind of looking kind of, and so.
And they got body cams too, but they just call them cell phones.
Well, sometimes,
so everybody's filming what we're doing.
Right, and so what's fascinating to me is that we don't have the greater understanding that as a function, it doesn't matter who performs in that function. There were black overseers on plantations.
That's true.
And so there are black folks pointing to the ships on the African continent for whatever that looked like. And so, I think we kind of romanticize a lot
Well,
of what, I don't know if that's the right word or not, but of what goes on. And so you have to establish trust. It's Stephen Covey, right? Wrote Speed of Trust. And it presumes there was trust in the first place. Once lost, it's hard to rebuild. I believe it's Stephen Covey. And but there was no trust in this system for certain demographics of this land, because the only function for slave patrols was punitive. Now, you couldn't hobble them to where they couldn't work, but if that owner, whoever owned them, said just they're going to be a poison, if you bring them back here, they're going to be a poison to the rest of these Negroes, and we can't have that. And I think that became maybe the spark for brutalization of these black bodies. Like, we can do whatever we want to do with them because he doesn't want them back.
And especially
and now we've done reforms, but the system is working as designed.
Wow.
So it's black, brown, poor whites, or those who are especially empathetic to blacks, browns, and poor whites. I mean, it's a closed system. And so what we're going to have to do is rethink public safety and then build what needs to be built to accommodate that. But policing does not equal public safety. But we have said it enough that most of us believe that it is.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see the impact of this.
Where did Andy Griffith live? He lived over there. Where did Andy Griffith live at? Over there in
Mayberry.
Mayberry. I wanted to say Maryville.
North Carolina.
Mayberry.
But yeah, so that kind of conditioning and socialization, changing the propaganda around it, all that started with him and the guys. You know, I'm talking about, like My Boy Friday, not My Boy. Dragnet. So those are, and maybe people don't see that as, but that's what, so half of the television programming right now is around policing or controlling or laws. Law and Order, CSIs, all the different countries are doing that in. Law and Order, all the different versions of that. There has always been, every decade, since about 1953, that the message has been presented to this society as police are always good. They're here for your good. They're here for your safety. And then we're left to decide good apples, bad apples, and all these other narratives. At the end of the day, we have got to have a policing, not a policing function, a public safety function that is not centered in policing.
Wow.
But we're not prepared to do that as a society, I don't think.